Hey everyone, welcome back. If this is your first time here, this is a channel about the dark, forgotten corners of history, so stick around. Picture a small village in Germany. The year is around 1490. An old woman named Greta lives alone at the edge of town. Her husband died years ago. She knows which herbs stop a fever, and which roots ease a woman's pain during childbirth. The village has always come to her for that. Until the night a baby dies during a difficult birth. And someone remembers. Greta was the one who was there. Within a week, there's a knock on her door. And the men holding the warrant aren't acting on rumor alone. They're following a book. That book had a name. The Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches. It was written a few years earlier by a man named Heinrich Kramer, not a farmer, not a soldier, but a Dominican friar and a papal inquisitor, a man whose entire career was built on finding heresy wherever the church told him to look. Here's the part most people never hear. Before he wrote his book, Kramer had already tried this once. In the town of Innsbruck, he attempted to put a group of women on trial for witchcraft. And he lost. Local officials thought he was obsessive, maybe even inappropriate in his questioning. They threw the case out and sent him home. Most men would have walked away embarrassed. Kramer went home and wrote a manual to make sure no court could ever dismiss him again. So when those men showed up at Greta's door, they weren't improvising. They were following a script laid out in 3 parts. Part 1 of the book existed to settle an argument before it started. Witches were real, full stop, and anyone who doubted it was already flirting with heresy themselves. Part 2 gave the villagers their evidence, even before a trial began. A crop failed. Witchcraft. A man became impotent. Witchcraft. A baby died in a hard birth, with only an old midwife in the room. That fit the pattern too. Part 3 is where the book stopped being theology and became something closer to a torture manual. It told magistrates exactly how to interrogate a suspect, and it gave them religious permission to use pain to get the confession they'd already decided on. And the book was almost eager to point out who to look at first. Women. Weaker, it claimed, in body and spirit, and therefore easier for the devil to get inside. A midwife who lost a baby. A widow with no husband to speak for her. A woman with too sharp a tongue for the neighbor's comfort. Greta fit 3 of those descriptions before anyone even asked her a question. Greta's story isn't really about Greta. It's about how a single book could reach a door like hers in the first place. The Malleus Maleficarum was published only a few decades after Europe's printing press was invented. For the first time, a text like this didn't need monks copying it by candlelight for years. It could be printed by the hundreds, in weeks. It went through roughly 28 editions between 1486 and 1600. Arguably, one of the first true bestsellers in European history. Except every copy sold came with a hidden cost. For close to 300 years, courts across the continent used it as their standard legal reference for identifying and convicting witches. Historians estimate that around 110,000 people were put on trial for witchcraft between 1450 and 1750. Roughly half were executed. Close to 3 out of every 4 were women. Women like Greta, in villages that probably never even knew each other's names. Here's the detail that surprises most people when they hear this story for the first time. The Catholic Church itself never fully signed off on this book. Not long after it was published, theologians at the University of Cologne, the same institution Kramer had gone to for approval, condemned it. They said its legal logic was broken, and that some of what it recommended crossed a line even for the Inquisition. Some historians now believe Kramer may have forged the church's letter of endorsement, just to make the book look more official than it really was. But by the time that condemnation reached anyone, it was already too slow. The fear was already loose. A committee's objection, printed once, could never travel as fast as 300 years of fear. Already in motion. Greta isn't one specific woman you can look up in a record book. She's a stand-in, for a midwife in one village, a widow in another, a woman with a sharp tongue somewhere else entirely. Different names, same knock at the door, same book sitting open on the table when it happened. That book still exists today. You can find copies in rare book rooms and university libraries. You can hold the same pages that once decided who got to live in a village and who didn't. So here's a question worth sitting with before you close this video. How much of what scares us today do we actually choose to believe? And how much of it did somebody just hand us?